An old cop is dispatched to handle a robbery case, but when he arrives, he's shocked to see who the thief is. Larry was a respected police officer to everyone. He was the kind of man who inspired admiration effortlessly, the kind who commanded respect just by the way he walked or looked. His hair, nearly all white, and his attentive eyes made it clear that he had spent his entire life in uniform. He was old in the profession, and that was reflected in the way he spoke, the words he chose. He remembered the name of every person he had helped during his service, even after many years, and he had helped a lot of people. He was known for being patient, speaking little and calmly, but also for being firm when needed. His name carried stories, moments when he prevented tragedies, calmed tense situations, solved conflicts with a controlled shout. No one in the department passed by him without carrying some memory, some notable gesture, some time when Larry held chaos with his own hands. But behind the worn-out uniform, the calm voice, and the figure that inspired security, there was a loneliness deeply engraved, a constant sadness that he shared with no one. Larry became a widower when Jacob, his only son, was only 4 years old. Since then, he had to be both a father and a police officer, balancing shifts with raising a child. But time was always insufficient. The late nights working, the missed weekends, the birthdays forgotten, it all accumulated. While fighting crime on the streets, the absence grew inside the house. Jacob was raised feeling the absence of his father more than his presence. Larry tried to make up for it with gifts, short conversations, quick advice before rushing out to another round. He loved his son, but the love, however genuine, could never fill the space left by the distance. Jacob grew up withdrawn, restless, influenced by the wrong friends, and a city that offered easier ways than the right paths. Larry watched his son drift away day by day and never knew how to stop it. The insecure boy became a rebellious young man. The father, who everyone saw as an example, as a reference, felt helpless in his own home. And as the years went by, Jacob ceased to be just a lost boy. He became a man without direction. That morning started like so many others. Larry woke up early, as he always did, put on his uniform with the same calm routine, strapped on his belt, and had a quick coffee. The sound of the radio in the patrol car, turned on since leaving the station, filled the silence with calls from the city, without much urgency, without anything new. The same route, the same traffic, the same Jack by his side, his patrol partner for more than 8 years, a discreet, attentive man with few words, silent, fiddling with his phone between conversations. Larry drove as always, keeping his eyes on the rearview mirror, on the corners, on the people rushing along the sidewalks. The city seemed to run on autopilot. Nothing that morning indicated what was waiting for him. He didn't even bother commenting on the radio call that came through, as he did when it was something unusual. It was just another robbery in a local store. The type of call he and Jack handled every week. Robbery, broken window, suspect still on the premises, the radio reported. Larry pursed his lips, nodded, and continued. "Let's go. It's probably just some desperate kid," Larry said. Jack looked out the window without much reaction. "If he's armed, it's going to be trouble," Jack said. "Yeah, we'll handle it, like always," Larry replied, dry, already used to it. The rest of the trip was in silence. They arrived at the location in less than 15 minutes. When they got out of the car, they immediately noticed the commotion. People were gathered on the sidewalk, store employees outside, 2 broken windows, and a large hole in the protective grate. One of the younger officers approached. He came in through the back, broke the grate, and smashed the glass. The store triggered the alarm. "We caught him still inside," the officer said, panting. Larry didn't respond. He walked past him, entering through the shattered door, with Jack following closely behind. The air smelled of sweat, smoke, and broken glass. The mannequins lying on the floor gave the place a chaotic look. There were 3 officers surrounding a young man in the back of the store. He was on his knees, handcuffed, dirty, with a sweaty face and a lost look. Larry stopped. Time stopped with him. He looked at the dirty, tired face and for a moment didn't understand. He thought it was an illusion, a mistake. But the next few seconds confirmed what his chest had already felt like a punch. It was Jacob, his son, his boy, there, on the ground, surrounded by police officers. Larry couldn't move. The store disappeared. The voices faded away. There was only that young man, his head down, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He said nothing. He didn't try to explain. He just looked up for a brief second and then lowered his gaze again. It was as if he was saying, "This is it. I'm here now." Larry felt his throat close up. His chest tightened in a dry, burning way. Every memory came rushing back. Jacob on his first day of school, Jacob at his mother's funeral, Jacob learning to ride a bike. It was all there, mixed with the pain of seeing his son handcuffed, dirty, caught in the act. It was a kind of pain that had no name. "No," Larry murmured, almost voiceless. Jack stayed behind, silent, watching it all. He knew who that boy was. He knew what that meant. Larry took a deep breath and took 2 slow steps toward Jacob. The officer holding the boy's arm looked at him with hesitation. "Let him go," Larry said, firm but controlled. The young officer looked at Jack, who simply nodded with a small movement of his head. Without saying a word, he removed his hands from Jacob's shoulder. Larry bent down, grabbed his son's arm with force, pulled him to his feet roughly, almost too harshly. There was no gentleness in the gesture. There was weight, a mute fury, a contained desperation that he couldn't hide anymore. "Get up," Larry said, not looking his son in the eyes. Jacob didn't resist. He simply got up, looking down at the floor. The handcuffs still held his wrists. Larry stared at his face, dirty, tired, aged by the street. He said nothing, but the look was enough. A look that said everything: frustration, sadness, a type of anger that comes from powerlessness. It wasn't hate. It was worse. It was the feeling of failure. Jack approached slowly, stopping beside Larry. "Are you taking him?" Jack asked softly. Larry didn't look away from Jacob. "I am," Larry said coldly. Jack stayed silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "Robert hasn't arrived yet, but he won't be long," Jack said. Larry narrowed his eyes, thinking quickly. There was no time. He had to act before the station chief showed up. "I'm taking him now. I'll talk to the store owner later," Larry said. Jack understood immediately. He knew exactly what his partner was trying to do. It wasn't the first time they had seen someone trying to protect a relative, but this was different. It was Larry, the most correct, the most firm. And now there, with his own son handcuffed, having to choose between duty and blood. They left the store in silence. People watched, but Larry didn't see anyone. He only felt his son's sweaty hand and the handcuffs that glimmered under the morning sun. In the car, Larry threw Jacob into the back seat without saying a word. He sat in front, started the engine, and kept silent. The patrol car drove through the streets as if it were empty. No words were spoken during the drive. When they reached the station, Larry entered through the back, avoiding the main hallways. He stopped in front of an empty room and locked the door. "Look at me," Larry said, standing in front of his son. Jacob slowly lifted his eyes. There was shame in them, but there was also something else, something Larry couldn't read. "Why, Jacob? Why?" Larry said, his voice breaking. Jacob opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He closed it again, swallowed hard. "Do you have any idea what you did? Do you know what this means?" Larry said, raising his voice. His son didn't answer. He just looked at him with a strange weariness, as if he had no energy left for anything. "You destroyed me," Larry said softly, firmly. Jacob closed his eyes for a moment, then spoke, almost in a whisper. I didn't know you were coming." Larry let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "And if it wasn't me, would you have run? Would you have hit someone? Would you have ended up dead?" I needed," Jacob said, trying to form a sentence. "Needed what? To steal? Is that it? Did it come to this?" Larry said, taking a step back. Silence fell again. Heavy, thick. Larry knew he couldn't waste time. He went to one of the rooms next door in search of the store owner. He found him sitting in a metal chair, still pale-faced, shoulders tense. He was a middle-aged man with familiar features. His name was Kevin. Larry recognized him immediately. Years ago, he had helped that same merchant in a case of violence involving an aggressive ex-employee. Since then, they had exchanged greetings from time to time, always with mutual respect. "Kevin, I need to talk to you." "Now," Larry said, straightforward. Kevin looked up and recognized him right away. "Larry, you were on the call?" Kevin said, surprised. Larry nodded. "It was my son, Kevin," Larry said without hesitation. The merchant stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to process it. "God, Larry, I didn't know," Kevin said. "I'll cover everything. All the damages, out of my pocket. But don't file a report. Please," Larry said firmly. Kevin breathed deeply and ran his hand through his hair. "You helped me once, that case with the violent employee, remember?" Kevin said. "I remember. That's why I'm here now, asking you this favor. Begging you, Kevin," Larry said, his voice heavy. Kevin looked at him for a moment, thoughtful. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, but only for you, Larry. And because I saw the state of the boy, it won't last if it keeps going like this," Kevin said. Larry shook his hand firmly. "Thank you," Larry said. He went back to the room and tore up the papers that were still on the table. Nothing was registered, no stamp, no copy. To the station, none of this existed. Later, after the shift was over, Larry left with Jacob. The son, now without handcuffs, remained silent. In the car on the way back, no words were spoken. The silence between the two seemed larger than anything. Larry knew, even while driving back home, he hadn't saved Jacob. He had only pushed the fall further down the road. That night, after leaving the station, Larry and Jacob arrived home without exchanging a word. The silence between them seemed bigger than everything that had happened. Larry dropped the keys on the table, sat for a moment and looked at Jacob, who remained standing, leaning against the wall, with his eyes down. "Sit," Larry said, pointing to the chair in front of him. Jacob hesitated, but eventually obeyed. He sat down slowly, shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. Larry rested his elbows on the table and intertwined his fingers. He took a deep breath. "You're going to listen to me now," Larry said, looking directly into his son's eyes. Jacob kept his gaze low, without reacting. "I'm not going to pretend I understand everything going on in your head. I'm not going to pretend I was the most present father in the world. I made mistakes, big ones, but you crossed a line, Jacob, and there won't be another chance." Jacob ran his hand through his hair, then rubbed his face hard. "You don't understand anything," he said, almost in a whisper. "Then explain it to me," Larry said firmly. "Because honestly, I want to understand. Explain to me why you ended up in that store, breaking down doors, running from the police." "Because I'm tired," Jacob suddenly said. "I'm tired of waiting for things to get better. I'm tired of pretending everything was fine. I'm tired of being here, alone, with no one around. I'm tired of pretending you were enough." Larry leaned back in the chair a little. It wasn't just the answer. It was the way Jacob said it, as if he'd been holding that in for years. "I've always been here," Larry said, quieter. "Physically, maybe, but never really. You were always on the streets, always in uniform, always solving other people's problems. And me? Who solved mine?" Larry narrowed his eyes. That hurt more than anything, more than seeing his son handcuffed. "Do you think I chose this? Do you think I wanted to be away? Do you think I didn't die every time I saw your empty bed when I came back from a shift? Then why didn't you change? Jacob said, finally looking at his father for the first time. Why didn't you ever quit for me? Larry took a long time to respond. The words were stuck. Because it was what I knew how to do. It was what I had to make sure you had food, a roof, a safe life. And in the end, I couldn't even do that, he said, his voice breaking. Silence returned for a few seconds. Then Larry stood up, went to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and poured 2 glasses. He put one in front of Jacob, who didn't touch it. From tomorrow, everything changes, Larry said, sitting back down. You'll have a schedule. You'll work. You'll see a psychologist. You'll get your chance. One last one. Are you going to watch me all day now? Jacob said with irony. If necessary, yes, Larry replied seriously, but that's not what I want. What I want is to see you away from the bottom, because I saw your look today, and what I saw wasn't just a mistake, it was resignation. Jacob squeezed his eyes shut, as if holding something back. The anger was still there, but there was fatigue behind it, an old sadness accumulated. And you think a job will fix this? No, but it'll give you routine. It'll give you direction. I know a guy, a warehouse owner. He's always needing help. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it's honest, and it's a start, Larry said. Jacob didn't respond right away. He just looked at the full glass. I'm not like you, he finally said. I know, Larry said, and I don't want you to be. I just want you to have a choice. The next morning, Larry went to the department and turned in his request for leave. He said he needed time, nothing more. The commander looked at him in surprise, but didn't ask questions. Jack was the only one who reacted differently. Are you going to disappear? Jack said, leaning on the hood of the car as Larry packed his things. For a while. There's something more urgent than the streets now, Larry said. Jack nodded slowly, crossing his arms. It's for him, right? Larry just looked at him, not answering. Do what you have to do, but if you need me, you know, Jack said. I know. Thank you. In the following days, Larry organized everything. He took Jacob to the warehouse where he knew the owner, a man named Gary, an old acquaintance from the days of patrol. Gary, this is my son, Jacob. He needs to work, Larry said directly, in the small office behind the wooden counter. Gary looked at Jacob for a few seconds, silently evaluating him with that tough look of someone who had seen many people come there as a last resort. Got some strength in your arms? He said. I do, Jacob answered firmly. Larry kept his tone low but firm. He just needs a chance, an open door, nothing more. Gary looked at Jacob. Starts tomorrow, 7 in the morning. No tardiness, Gary said. Larry thanked him, and that night he prepared everything. Bought a pair of boots, packed a bag, wrote the bus schedule on a piece of paper. Don't go out after 10, Larry said. Are you going to lock me up too? Jacob replied, tired. No, but if you want to leave, you'll have to look me in the eyes first, and bear whatever I have to say. In addition to the job, Larry set up sessions with a trusted psychologist he had worked with in the past. He forced Jacob to go. I have nothing to say to anyone, Jacob said, sitting in the consulting room. Then go and stay quiet, but go. That's it, Larry said. The first days were tough. Jacob woke up begrudgingly, came home exhausted, spent hours locked in his room. But Larry remained firm. Every night, he waited for his son to come home, sat in the living room, listened for his footsteps, sometimes went to the room and knocked just to make sure he was there. Is everything okay? He asked. Yeah, came the short reply. Weeks went by. Jacob kept the routine, went to work, attended the sessions. But something in him remained blocked. There was no real conversation between the two, just instructions, short answers, cold exchanges of looks. Larry tried to break this day after day. Did you really hate the police? he asked one night. "No, I hated sharing you with them," Jacob said. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but maybe I failed badly," Larry said. "Maybe you did," Jacob answered, without bitterness, but also without relief. Larry started visiting old colleagues, asking for advice, seeking help. He tried to open new doors for his son, but deep down, he already knew. This effort was rebuilding on top of ruins, and the cracks were everywhere. Still, he kept trying. Because for Larry, love meant this, not giving up while someone was still there. But then came the first sign something was wrong. Jacob came home 2 hours later than he should have. He said the bus was delayed. Larry just nodded, but his gaze lingered a little longer on his son. The second sign came with an entire day of absence, with no word. Gary called in the late afternoon. "Larry, your son didn't show up today." "No word," Gary said, his voice firm. Larry thanked him and hung up without saying much. That night, Jacob came home smelling of alcohol with red eyes. He said he had a problem. He didn't explain what. "If you miss one more day, you'll lose your job," Larry said as Jacob took off his shoes in the living room. "I know," Jacob answered, without looking at his father. The next day, he went to work, but the frequency started to drop. From missing 2 days, it turned into 3, then an entire week. Gary tried to keep the job out of respect for Larry, but eventually it became impossible. "Larry, I'm sorry, but I can't keep him anymore. He doesn't want to," Gary said regretfully. Larry just nodded. He no longer had any arguments. Marks began to appear on Jacob's body. Small at first, discreet, only visible when he rolled up the sleeve of his shirt. Then they became more obvious. His look also changed. It was no longer just anger or discouragement. It was something else, a constant emptiness, as if something inside him had gone out. Larry tried to talk. "Are you using something?" he asked, firm, staring at his son in the kitchen. "No," Jacob replied without hesitation. "Then why the marks on your arm? Are you going to lie to my face?" "You think you know everything, but you know nothing," Jacob said coldly. Larry took a deep breath, holding back his urge to react more strongly. "I'm trying to save you, Jacob. That's all." "Save me from what?" "From my life. Because yours already drowned me a long time ago." Larry closed his eyes, swallowed the pain. There was no argument that would break through that wall. He began to watch him, not out of control, but out of desperation. He would wait for Jacob to leave and follow him, sometimes on foot, sometimes by car. He saw his son entering streets he knew all too well, streets that had owners, streets that no one walked through casually. And it was on those corners that he heard the first whispers. The old man's kids running with the wrong crowd. The kid who got caught at the store, he's hanging out with them now. "Larry, be careful. Those guys don't forgive." Larry recognized the names, the faces, people he had arrested, seen killed, seen die. Medium and large-time thieves, all circulating in the same circle where Jacob was now floating. One day, he couldn't take it anymore. He waited for Jacob to come home and confronted him at the door. "Who are you running with, Jacob?" "With no one you care about," the son replied, walking past. Larry grabbed his arm firmly. "It's not like that. You know it's not." Jacob shook him off quickly, his body now harder, more used to resistance. "I'm not your problem anymore." "Yes, you are, and you will be until the last day of my life." "Ah. Then live your life and forget about me, because I'm not that kid you left alone at home anymore," Jacob said, staring at his father with a look that held no feelings anymore, only fatigue and hardness. Larry couldn't say anything else that night. He sat on the couch, listened to his son's footsteps to his room, and stayed there until dawn. A few weeks later, the call came. It was from the station itself, a firm, professional voice. "Larry, Jacob was arrested. He's here." He hung up without responding. The coffee cup was on the table, still full, already cold. Larry didn't cry. He just stared at nothing, motionless. The world had somehow only confirmed what he had already feared. Jacob had crossed the line that can't be crossed. He went to the station. When he arrived, he saw his son handcuffed once again, sitting on the concrete bench in the triage section. But now it was different. Jacob didn't look defeated, nor repentant. He looked resigned. He stared at the floor with empty eyes. When he saw his father, he didn't say anything. He didn't even react. There was a distance between them that no word could cross. Larry walked up to him, stopped in front, without saying anything. Jacob slowly raised his eyes. There was no shame, no surprise, just the presence of someone accepting his fate. Extortion, robbery, association with a criminal organization, the detective said when Larry asked for details. Larry just listened. He didn't argue, didn't ask for explanations. He just listened and nodded. The process was long, the charges were heavy, the crimes combined didn't allow for deals. Jacob was judged, convicted. Larry attended every hearing. He sat in the last row, silent. He didn't ask for mercy, didn't ask for forgiveness. He just wanted to be there, as if to say with his body, I didn't give up. I just couldn't. On the day of the sentence, he left the courtroom more bent than when he entered. Jack was waiting outside. They did what they had to do, Jack said softly. And so did I, Larry replied. The following months passed like a constant wait. Larry retired shortly after Jacob's conviction. There was no more energy, no more motivation, and although he said it was time, everyone knew he left because he no longer fit in that uniform. He walked slower, spoke less. His eyes were always distant. Jack, now also retired, visited him from time to time for coffee and to reminisce about the old times. Do you still go there every month? Jack asked. I do, Larry replied. Does he say anything? Not much. Larry brought books, home-cooked food, some old photographs. Jacob received everything in silence. They sat across from each other, with the concrete table between them, the guards around, and time slowly slipping by. Are you taking care of yourself? Larry asked. I am. Are you reading the books? Some. The silence filled the rest of the visit. But Larry kept going, month after month, without expecting redemption, without expecting a miracle, just going, because even though everything had failed, he was still a father. Larry spent his days at home. He read little, walked less, observed more. The younger colleagues still mentioned him with respect, but few knew his story. Jack was one of the few who still showed up from time to share the silence. Larry didn't speak much about Jacob, but he didn't hide it either. He had gone until the end. He had tried everything: love, rules, presence, limits. He gave everything he could give, and even so, he lost. Not because he didn't love, but because sometimes love simply isn't enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.